Tonight, we're joined by two distinguished experts to unpack these complex issues. Mr. Mohamed Osman, an international relations specialist from Cairo, and Professor Omar Al-Bastanji, a political economist and analyst from Amman. Good afternoon to you both, gentlemen, and welcome to Qnews 2 In Depth. Let me start here with Mr. Osman, and let me here ask you, what, from your point of view, what do you think the main strategic objectives from the United States strike on Iran?
Thank you for having me, Mona. It was rather clear that the United States allowed Israel to launch its war of aggression on Iran as part of a bigger strategy of trying to push Iran to sign a deal with regards to its nuclear program in accordance with the conditions that have been placed with the United States, primarily the condition of zero enrichment, the removal of all highly enriched uranium from inside Iran to a third country, probably Russia, and also subjecting the Iranian nuclear program to substantive and extensive international monitoring and supervision. So that was the way that, among the means that the United States has employed to pressure Iran, was the military means. And Israel intervened in the war for about 11 days. They have inflicted substantial damage on Iran's military infrastructure and also substantial damage on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. However, they could not take out the three major Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. So the United States intervened swiftly in a very swift operation where it used its own equipment and unique military capabilities to target these establishments. However, it's not clear whether the claims of President Trump stand. He claims that Fordow and others were completely obliterated, despite Fordow being about 90 meters beneath the ground level. However, other sources within the U.S. government that have spoken and reports that were leaked to the press have questioned Trump's claims, varying from that very little damage was done to that substantial damage was done. However, there is no credible report that says that the institutions have been completely obliterated. However, nevertheless, Iran admitted that substantial damage did happen to its nuclear facilities. And now President Trump has halted this war and is seeking to engage Iran once again diplomatically. And Iran, on the other hand, President Pezeshkian did say in the speech after the end of the war, in which he claimed victory for Iran, he said that Iran is ready to return to the negotiating table to defend the interests and the rights of the Iranian people. So that means that Iran as well has signaled that it is ready for talks. And according to many reports, there were many communications between Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy to the Middle East, and senior Iranian officials throughout the war, meaning that they might have a certain framework for future negotiations ahead. And just yesterday, the United States hinted, according to some reports, that President Trump is ready to invest about $30 billion in Iran's civilian nuclear program in case they make a deal in order for them to develop it in a very peaceful manner that stands up to the American standards. Of course, we take this information with a great grain of salt. We cannot really believe such reports at face value. However, it does indicate that the United States end game at the end of the day is to reach a settlement, a political settlement with the Iranians with regards to their nuclear program, as opposed to the Israelis, who would prefer to go all the way militarily in the long war in order to destroy the nuclear capabilities, destroy Iran's military capabilities as well, and even topple the Iranian regime. And this is where the United States does not share the vision of Israel.
Exactly, Dr. Osman. Here, all these reports, whether they are doubted or not, they all open big question marks about the real objectives of those strikes. I'll get back to you, Mr. Osman. Let me here go to Professor Omar. And Professor Omar, from an economic and political perspective, what are the underlying motives for the U.S. involvement beyond supporting Israel?
Let's agree that the USA is the most important supporter for Israel, but there is a difference in the US aim regarding Iran and the other side. And I don't mean Israel, I mean Netanyahu. When they had part in hitting, they wanted to end the war quickly for many reasons. First, Netanyahu's plan depended on several stages. The first one is following USA's vision, which started by hitting Iranian people in Iran, in addition to damaging the nuclear missiles and also killing the other researchers. But the USA intervened to stop Netanyahu from continuing with this war to control Iran, and he wanted more than that, which is killing the political control in Iran. USA has benefits. So according to the long vision of which he said in his theory, working on the differences in all kinds. So after falling, after the diminishing of the Islamic political in Egypt, so they wanted to keep Iran as a base for Islam in Middle East, and whatever it wants. The Middle East uses the USA uses Iran to they want, and having USA as supporter. And the second reason is the reduction. After 12 days of war between Israel and Iran, it started to eradicate, and we started to watch requests from Israel for people to leave Israel, and also tens of thousands of Israelis wanted compensation for what happened to their buildings and their jobs. And overall, that the huge budget of the war, they needed a huge budget starting from they needed more than $200 daily. So the budget started to affect Israel's economy.
Now, let me hear Professor Omar reiterate the question, because I'm not speaking about the Israeli side. I was speaking about, from an economic and political perspective, what could be the underlying motivations in the U.S. involvement in this war. The U.S. motivations for the U.S. Involvement, of course, beyond supporting Israel.
As I said, what they wanted to stop the economical bleeding because of how much it cost. Because as I told you, it needs over $200 million daily. And this is so much in regards to Israel's economy, which depends heavily on USA's economy. And also the USA was afraid that Iran would use, so it affected the prices of energy worldwide, which increased the prices, which will affect the USA. And over that, that happened, there will be consequences, economic consequences in the USA, because they are concerned and they want to have Israel alive in the Middle East to accomplish their geopolitical goals. And of course, the USA will have to pay for Israel, so they didn't want to. So they didn't
Yes,
want to prolong that.
but these are the answers to why it stopped its involvement, not why it was involved at the very beginning. But I'll get back to you, Professor Omar. Let me go here to Mr. Osman. And Mr. Osman, how do you see the role of Iranian oil in shaping the foreign policy beyond the military dimension?
The foreign policy of Iran, you mean? Because it's
The foreign shaping the U.S. policy, the Iranian oil, and
Iranian oil is completely non-consequential to the United States. The U.S. receives about zero oil from Iran, and China purchases about 94% of Iran's oil exports. So basically, the role Iranian oil plays due to sanctions in the global energy market is negligible and completely ineffective. But the problem with oil in the region, had this war continued, was that if the Straits of Hormuz were closed or navigation was prevented or obstructed, at least in the Straits of Hormuz, where about 25% of all of the world's container energy, whether oil or gas, comes through, it would have been a disaster, of course. It would have caused a huge spike in energy prices, and it would have increased global inflation, leading to a global economic crisis. So, but this did not happen for obvious reasons, because it will be to the detriment of everyone. And President Trump played the oil card in one of his tweets when he or his Truth Social posts when he ended the war between Israel and Iran, or the Israeli war on Iran rather. He said that China should thank me now because they can receive their oil from Iran, and he said that, hinting that he might not sanction Iranian oil going into China, as it used to be the case before this war, basically giving more leeway and more incentives for both Iran and maybe even China, so that China could play a more proactive role in pushing Iran towards a nuclear deal. That seems to be the U.S. strategy with regards to that. However, the United States has a vested interest in the stability of the energy markets. Any disruption of the energy markets or haphazard rise in energy prices will affect the U.S. domestic economy directly, will increase the rates of inflation, which means prices will rise, just like in the days of Biden when the Russia-Ukraine war started. And it led to the failure of the Democrats. This is one of the factors that led to the Democratic loss in the 2024 election was inflation. So if there's a repeat of such a phenomenon, the Republicans might be in deep trouble in the upcoming midterm elections in 2026 in Congress. So it seems that President Trump is treading a very thin line, and he's trying not to balance between the foreign policy interests of his country and along with the very strategic partnership the United States has with Israel, and with his domestic economic needs in the U.S. home front.
It seems, Mr. Osman, that the economy is really shaping up the whole geopolitical scene here. If I may go here to Professor Omar. And Professor Omar, how do you interpret the timing of these strikes in relation to the recent shifts in regional alliances?
الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية
First of all, the USA wants to stop this war, especially after achieving its goal, which is destroying Iran's nuclear war, and they have real associates in the Middle East, and so they don't want to worsen this, which will cause damage to the Middle East and will have fragile relationships. So the USA, of course, had this strike aiming to stop this war and not prolonging it, especially that the war between Israel and Iran, they don't have common resolutions, but it is done through other countries. So this will have things get worse, which will be an international war which doesn't align with the USA's goals and doesn't serve Iran and Israel. So at the end, the USA actually wanted to they acted in accordance with their goals, and Israel's also, especially that we went to a no getting back point and we entered a war with no end. So we are watching a daily war with no clear goals from Iran, Israel, or even Palestine. So we can see that the USA is more keen to stop this war because it went out of hand, and it is not to achieve some goals. It is just for the sole purpose of having a war without any pros to any of this side. So I think the USA wants to stop this war from Netanyahu's side, especially after they offered Netanyahu they will erase Netanyahu's criminal record. So they ended the war to stop all wars in the Middle East and give him the political, the economical, and they focused on the economical files that will allow America to flourish. So I think that Trump is totally convinced that wars in the Middle East have reached a point that is of no benefit to the Middle East, and so it is better to end these wars and discussing other economical aspects that will benefit the USA. They just want to have war and achieving some goals for some
right.
people in the USA and Iran.
Right. Let me here go to Mr. Osman. And Mr. Osman, could these strikes accelerate the fragmentation of Iran internally? And what kind of signs are we awaiting to watch that happening?
Everyone should hedge their bets at this point about the internal fragmentation of Iran. Not at this point, at least. If anything, the Israeli aggression on Iran supremely backfired on that front. There was a suggestion or a calculation that if the Israelis and the Americans target or attack Iran and attempt to destabilize the regime through degrading its military and security capabilities, because let's not forget that not only were military targets attacked in this war, but police stations, prisons, Basij bases, all of these are internal security institutions. So it seems that there was a goal by the Israelis to destabilize Iran and pave the way for an internal uprising of some sort. This did not happen, even though that the Iranian regime's popularity is at an all-time low. Yet the concept of a foreign aggression against their own country galvanized support for the regime, because people stood shoulder to shoulder with their own government to fend off a foreign aggression, a war of aggression, an attack by a foreign power. So it was rather counterproductive, and I think it did not deliver the required results. And this even led to the conclusion reached even by the Israelis themselves that regime change in Iran can only be achieved by the Iranians, because the Trump administration is not even remotely interested in the idea of regime change in Iran, because there is no viable alternative, and the regime has become so entrenched within the Iranian state that they have become almost inseparable. So if the regime collapsed, there is a very good chance that the state would collapse, including the military and the security services. And of course, this will lead to chaos. Iran is a pivot state. It is a state that has huge strategic value. It is a large regional power. Its population is over 92 million. So you can imagine.
Yes, I can imagine how will that reflect on the Middle East and the balance of power it will create. We thank you so much, Mr. Mohamed Osman and Professor Omar Al-Bastanji, for sharing your insights with us today.